So welcome to Midcoast Women, a Midcoast Women event. We're a group that came together after 2016, a little disappointed in the outcome of the election. Thought,
Talk towards the microphone.
little upset with the outcome of the election. But one of the things that we realized, thank you, Sarah, is that we really needed to strengthen our voices as women. So we came together as a group, and here's our mission here. We provide opportunities for area women of all ages to find and strengthen our individual and collective voices.
Could you use the microphone, please?
You want me to pull it over? Oh, yo.
I can't hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So anyway, that's who we are, and we have programs like this from time to time. They're on a range of topics. Sometimes they're about art, and sometimes they're about people running for political office. Sometimes they're about sports. So, but they always have that thing, that piece in common about women and their voices and how they're managing and dealing with various obstacles to really strengthen, amplify our voices. Tonight's program is What's a Mother to Do? Am I getting, oh, by the way, before I start to introduce Sarah Austin, who's in the back there, she's going to be monitoring our folks on Zoom, and she wanted me to be sure and tell them, go ahead and put your questions into the chat anytime, and Sarah will be curating them, and when we get to Q&A, she will be your voice for these. Is that all right? Okay. So anyway, those of us who work on the planning committee for Midcoast Women, Libby Shrum is also here in the back. She manages our website and our graphics and things like this. When we do a program, we get to pick the topic that appeals to us, and so that makes it particularly motivating. The rest of the team pitches in and helps and all has jobs to do it, but we get to get inspired and decide. Em, if you can put up that screenshot now. Here was my inspiration for this program. That's a picture of Leisha, who is next to me, and her daughter. That was on Facebook. And this was the first time I heard what was going on with Leisha. I don't cry easily, and I'm about to cry. So she said, I am not okay. At 23, my daughter is currently a missing person. There are summons out for her arrest. She is incredibly sick. She's a severe opioid addict, specifically fentanyl. She has a multitude of mental health issues, including bipolar with delusions. She will die from a heart infection caused by needle use, an overdose, or as a victim of a crime from life on the street. An Oxford Hills Comprehensive High School peer introduced her to the deadly drug. Yet I have to wake up every day and somehow live. I have responsibilities and goals. I have hopes and dreams. But how can anyone live like this? The only thing I can control is myself, and right now I'm struggling to stay in the light. The dark seems to be a better place, maybe the only place I feel comfortable. The dark calls to me, yet I know my time in the light is not done. So here's what I need. I need you to care about addicts. I need you to support recovery programs, legislation that increases healthcare options, and inventive ways to solve the opioid crisis. I need you to support us. It's a time to end the shame inflicted on the family. As we say in the recovery world, where's my casserole? Where's my support? Where's my community? There are millions of mothers and fathers just like me. We carry this every second of every single day. My life is torturous enough, and while I shouldn't have to beg for help, I am. Not just for me, I'm just one small person amid a global opioid crisis. I'm asking for all of us. This is just too much for any of us to carry alone. I need help to stay in the light. Please help. I don't think you knew I was going to read that, did you? But after I read that, the thing that just came to me was like, what's a mother to do? You know, as mothers, we have so much. I say we, I have 2 cats. But we have so much responsibility for the well-being of our families, particularly our emotional health. And so everybody in the family struggles, as Leisha said here, but mothers have a very special role in this situation. And so we wanted to highlight their pleas and their questions and their comfort that anyone may be able to offer. So the way we're going to do this program tonight is Leisha's going to tell a story with the microphone about her experience and where it has taken her to today. This was, I think, 6 or 7 months ago, wasn't it? And then we will be going to Jeannie, who's going to tell her story and how it has influenced her up to this day. And then the last person will be Molly, who is a service provider. Is that a good word? Okay. And there are many of you out there who are in those roles as well. So thank you for being here tonight for Leisha and for all of us and all the mothers out there. So with that, Leisha, handing it over to you.
Okay. Can you hear me okay? Okay. So I'm going to give you a trigger warning because I'm going to mention suicide and suicidal thoughts today, and so I'll give you a little heads up on that. And before I start, my daughter, as of today, June 22nd at 6:10, is stable and okay-ish. She's okay-ish. So these are the top 3 conversations I never thought I'd have. Number 1, a phone call with my daughter. I got overdosed and died in my bed last night. Come right now. Number 2, with a cardiologist at Maine Med. Your daughter's heart infection is back. She doesn't have long if we don't find her soon. Number 3, with a Portland police officer. There's been a human trafficking incident. We would like you to file a missing persons report. I could share many tragic stories from the past 10 years as we've traveled this path of addiction. I could tell you about the time she stole my car, went on a crime spree with my car, and caught my car on fire. It's always something involving my car. And I could also tell you that she's the most amazing artist, poet, and musician. I could share the boxes of love letters she's written me. I could share that she loves her family so fiercely. I wore not waterproof mascara because I'm not gonna cry. Okay. She loves her family so fiercely that it overwhelms her. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here to answer the simple question, what's a mother to do when her beloved child has a serious addiction? And I don't think you're gonna like my answer, because if you're here to find a way to fix, help, cure, or save your addicted family member, I know you're desperate for answers. The sad truth is that we cannot save, fix, change, or control anyone ever. The only thing we can control are our choices and our attitudes. Hold on, my thing went on. If there was a magic checklist, I would have already tried it. I would have used it to save my stepson, who died from addiction-related issues at 29. His death also almost ended my soulmate's life. I would have done everything on the magic checklist to save them from a life battling addiction, an addiction they never asked for and is so misunderstood. All I can do is share my story and how I've survived this long with my sanity intact. Well, mostly my sanity intact. My daughter's been addicted to fentanyl for many years. Her addiction started 10 years ago when she was 14. She was introduced to opioids by a classmate, and our lives have never been the same. I thought her addiction was under control last year, but I have never been more wrong in my life. When she was diagnosed with endocarditis, a fatal heart infection, my life went sideways. Seeing her look like a skeleton, then months spent in the ICU, followed by her immediate return to fentanyl, changed me. Having her catch my car on fire changed me. Having her go missing at Christmas, doctors calling because they were desperate to find her because they believed her infection was back, followed by cops telling me that she was a victim of human trafficking, broke something in me. So this is your trigger warning. I travel for work, and I'm on the highway all the time. All I see is trees. And my mantra in December was, I'm going to drive into that tree. I'm going to drive into that tree. I'm going to drive into that tree. I'm not a depressed, anxious person by nature. I've never had suicidal ideations and took pride in how strong I was. But now I have PTSD, not because of me or my life choices, but because of living with the fallout from my family's addiction was so damaging to me. I didn't think I'd really drive into a tree, but it was enough of a wake-up call to say that something needed to change. It is so exhausting to pretend to be normal, to pretend that my entire world isn't wildly spinning out of control, to smile and wish everyone happy holidays while my daughter is missing, dying, or already dead. To save my life, I went public. We own a karate school, and I thought we'd probably lose every student because I had no idea why anyone would ever let me around their kid, let alone teach them. But I couldn't face another day pretending. I couldn't wear the everything's fine mask one more second. And of course, I turned to Facebook because that's what we do. And then I said what Pam had already said. What I received back was beyond overwhelming. I had no idea that so many people cared about us or our struggles. I never expected support because I'd spent so long in hiding. Living in fear and shame didn't prepare me for this amount of love and support. When Pam asked me if I'd speak today, I didn't hesitate because I know what it's like to ask what's a mother to do. And I also know the answer won't be what some want to hear. I believe that we as mothers of these beautiful souls only have one play. The only play we have is to stop putting our time, energy, and efforts into fixing, curing, and saving them. We need to spend that energy on healing ourselves. This, of course, doesn't mean that we stop loving or supporting them. It does mean that we cannot possibly be the parent they need if we're unstable, unhealthy, or not here anymore. I was about to be not here anymore, and without a doubt, my daughter would follow me. If I turned to drugs and alcohol or lost myself in my own addiction, she'd follow me. If I became depressed or angry, she'd follow me. She has no chance at a future unless I'm here to answer the call when or if the time comes. For her to survive, I have to be ready to help her get into rehab or detox. I have to be ready to help her navigate healthcare, legal, and homelessness issues. I can't help her if there's nothing left of me. Until that day comes and she's ready to get back into recovery, there are a few things mothers like us can do. Number one, vote, support, and give money to organizations and leaders who support the recovery community. You'll hear more about this from these other amazing women. Number two, find something else that fulfills your life. I never wanted to be on this path, but my life isn't bad because of my daughter's addiction. I lead a very blessed life filled with love and joy because I found a new path. I've embraced this new path and I refuse to let addiction ruin my life. Number three, we must protect our own mental health as fiercely as we try to protect, defend, and save theirs. We must create life-saving boundaries. We must create a life of love and peace because we are also valued, appreciated, and deserving of such attention. Go public if you want support. It's okay if you're a private person and don't want to share. It's not okay if you're shamed into pretending for someone else's sake. I'm a strong, proud mother of a daughter battling addiction, but it's not what defines me, and I'm ready to love, help, guide, and protect her only because I'm willing to do the same thing for myself. And while my life doesn't stop anymore because of her illness, I'll be joyously living my life and waiting for her until she's ready to join me. Thank you.
I was noticing as I was listening to Leisha, I was looking out at the audience and looking at our speakers, and I saw a lot of head nodding, some tears rolling, and okay. So I want to introduce Jean Marquis. Em, you can take down Leisha's picture now. I want to introduce Jean Marquis, who is here. She has a background in journalism and public relations, and her second career as a grassroots organizer and activist helping the recovery community as an ally. She is currently an organizer for the Maine Rap Advocacy Project and Mobile Recovery, and I believe that's what we here call MeRap.
Yes.
Right.
MeRap
Okay.
for short.
She is a distributor and trainer for, how do you say it, naloxone?
Naloxone, otherwise known as
Naloxone.
Narcan.
Thank you. Which is the opioid overdose reversal medication. Jean is also a certified trainer for CRAFT, a program designed to help family members navigate their relationship with their loved one who is struggling with substance abuse. And part of her story will be about navigating her relationship with a son, wasn't it?
Yes.
Okay, and if you'll pull the
Oh,
microphone
thank
over.
you, thank you.
You'll need to pull it closer.
Okay. Well, what a powerful story you have. Wow. And you're so on target about taking care of yourself, because that's what you need to do to get through this roller coaster. Anyway, thank you for giving me the chance to speak to this powerful group of women. I'm thrilled that you have these meetings. This is just amazing. As the title of the program says, the opioid crisis has and will touch many of our families. And I never thought it would touch mine, but it did. My son, who is now 28, has struggled with addiction for at least 10 years. But it really started long before his first drink, long before he injected his first drug. You see, addiction is a brain disease. And he has suffered with debilitating social anxiety, medication-resistant depression, PTSD since childhood, very early childhood. And he never got much relief from the mental health professionals. And so he started drinking around age 16. He was introduced to heroin. And I had told him prior to that, I said, I know you're experimenting, but please don't try heroin. But he did. And I asked him once in a non-judgmental way, why did you take heroin? And he said, because the first time in my life, I felt normal, Mom. It's that powerful. And now, if opiate use comes to your family, like the title says of this program, you'll panic, of course, but once you do, take a breath and educate yourself. I think that's the primary thing. I read everything I could get my hands on. I learned about how the brain works. I learned about why people get addicted, how do you overcome it, what I can do as a family member. I just educated, I absorbed everything like a sponge. And there has been so much advancement in the study of addiction and how the brain works. So teach yourself, get up to date, find science, evidence-based tools that you can hopefully hook your loved one into when they're ready. But also be careful of the disinformation out there, especially now with fentanyl. There's a lot of scare, fear-mongering. You'll hear things from really well-intended people like they're gonna have to reach rock bottom. I hate that phrase, I really do. They mean well, but that might have worked in the old alcohol-only addiction. Or maybe it didn't. But with heroin, rock bottom means death. It comes on quickly, they don't wake up. So don't say that to anybody, please. The old paradigms we used to use decades ago, they don't work. You can't force someone into recovery. You can't wait till they reach rock bottom. However, there's a window of opportunity where they may just get disgusted one weekend with themselves. And that window of opportunity doesn't last real long. So as you're educating yourself, my next suggestion is to seek out connections with other families, much what Lisa was saying. Even if your loved one isn't ready for these connections, get you and yourself connected to like a recovery center, like the Coastal Recovery Center. Because through these, recovery impacts the whole family. It just does. Even if you try to buffer some of your other kids from that, it does affect them. And through these connections, you'll learn about resources. So when your family member is ready, you will know how to connect them to detox, rehabs, outpatient therapies. However, these resources are scarce, and my organization is working on that. We're trying to get funding for more. So when your family member has finally decided to go into detox, you have this brief opportunity, as I said before they change their minds. So make sure you know where the detox are, what insurance they take, what substance they will treat. Not all detox beds are alike. And the second thing, the third thing you need to do is, for your loved one, is to double down on that love. Love them unconditionally. And I know it's hard to, because you're not approving of what they're doing. Love them more than you ever thought you could. Because you know why? They're hurting. They didn't just wake up one day and say, I want to be an addict. They're treating themselves because the mental health system, for what other reason, hasn't reached them. So double down on that love, unconditionally. And then my last piece of advice is do something for yourself, just what Lisa was saying. And I found, because that worry, like what Lisa was saying, never goes away. You're worried about them 24 hours a day. They sleep in late. You kind of wonder, are they alive? You knock on their door. Like, oh yeah, you hear a rustle in their bedroom. You know, they're okay for another 24 hours. If they leave the house for a long time, you wonder where they are, who are they with, what are they doing with. That worry never goes away, even when they're in their early recovery. And then you wonder how long they're gonna stay in that recovery. My son he went to rehab 6 times, and that's actually average. Most people go to rehab at least 6 times, if not more. But what I did for myself is I knew I had to channel all that worrying into something constructive, turn it into something positive. So I got involved with the Maine Recovery Advocacy Project about 4 years ago. And what we do is we work on legislation that makes the world a little bit better for people in recovery and their families. And we also work on legislation that funds resources that are very scarce. And we're just ending this session, and I'm really excited we got some things passed. And through this work, I know I cannot fix my son. He's working on himself. But while he's working on himself, I can make his world just a little bit better through legislation and through grassroots education. So when he is better, he'll have fewer barriers, hopefully. He'll have less stigma. And that's why I channeled my worrying into constructive activity. And by the way, my son is 19 months sober. Yay. Thank you.
I'm really struck as I listen to Leisha's story and Jean's story by how long they've been dealing with this, and it still brings that lump to your throat, tears to your eyes. Okay. Well, our third speaker tonight is Molly Feeney, and she works as the Chief Program Officer of the Knox County Homeless Coalition, who serves Knox, Waldo, and parts of Lincoln County. And the mission and the goal of their work is to help families achieve sustainable independence. And at first I thought these last three words were corny until I heard these stories, and hope for the future. And so that's not just filler for the mission. So anyway, I should just say that the person who helped me organize this panel couldn't be here tonight, Penny Beebe Center, our state senator, because they are working their rears off at the State House today trying to get everything in. So she couldn't be here tonight, but she helped me organize it. And when she mentioned Molly, I was thinking, okay, well, if Penny thinks that this is a agency is a good choice, okay, fine, I'm good with that. But she will help us understand why homelessness, or the Homeless Coalition, is such an integral part of their stories and all the stories and the other networks. So you're on.
Thanks, Pam. I too said, "Are you sure you want me?" And I couldn't be more honored and humbled to be here and listening to these stories. I want so badly to give you a lens, each of you, into the people that show up every single day to be in the community, to be supporting all of these needs, because that's hopeful. And I think I put it on the bottom of my notes for the punchline, but I think the real question that we should all leave here today with is, what is a community to do? Because that's where this work needs to be addressed. There's no single pathway to substance use disorder. There's no single pathway to this disease. There are so many factors that are unique to every single story, but there is no question, and there are generations of evidence that if a community can meet all human beings and create a place for thriving, then there is a better chance. And some of this is science, some of it is chemistry, and I had the privilege of sitting out in the backyard. One of our programs is the Landing Place, and we invited some youth to the backyard for some spaghetti a couple weeks ago and said, we talk a lot about you, but do you have anything to say? And at the end of this conversation, we asked these 5 young men, they were about 15, 16, and 17 years old, if they had a magic wand and they could make 3 choices, what would they be? And all 5 of these young men first said, I would get rid of the drugs. I'd just get rid of all of them. I don't even want actually healthy drugs. I just want all the drugs gone. And they are all self-described users to some degree, all different and how this plays into their lives. They all emphasize with enthusiasm just how easy it is to get drugs. They also emphasize some boredom and remembering laying in bed at night contemplating a really stupid decision. And these are their words. And I knew that it was really stupid in that moment, but I didn't really have a good alternative. And so then I did it, and the next thing I know, I stopped negotiating with myself. And then it just started becoming part of my normal every day. But I also didn't know what to do with my idle time either. And, I think it's really important to know that every story is distinctly different in terms of where these individuals come from. And at the end of the day, the common thread is this is a disease, and it has to be treated like a disease. But if you look at public health statistics, you can look at communities and recognize that if done differently and if done well with access and dignity and holistic care, this disease does not have to impact people and to the same degree that it does, and certainly not as lethally as it does. So I said to Pam, one of the things that was really important to me as I sit here as a really proud employee of Knox County Homeless Coalition, that sometimes our title gets really confusing, because I think it's very important to break this down when we're talking about substance use disorder and recognize that not all human beings who experience SUD are homeless, and not all people that experience and that have SUDs become homeless. there is a wide overlap of co-occurring needs, and oftentimes substances can get the best of human beings and what resources they have. So this ends up being a really critical part of our work, because as an agency, it is our goal to treat an entire human being. And to do that, it's not just in discussion, and it's not just mapping resources, but it's meeting an individual exactly where they are and figuring out which pathway is accessible for them. And so this isn't one size fits all. It is complicated. I do have incredible faith in this particular community that there is ways to be able to meet this charge. But it's not for moms to carry alone. It is for us to make real systemic shifts in this. And some of this is really just honoring these humans for what they are up against. And I think that's what I'm just really struck by today, is that I couldn't walk away from here today questioning, how did that happen? And we get this all of the time when families are without housing. Can you tell me a little bit about like how they get there? And I'm way more diplomatic than this, but I really want to say, like, does it matter? Does it really matter how we get here? Because there's still a need. And so I hope that's something that we can talk about more openly too, and break that down. And what are the fears in the how? And simply land on worth. Every one of us has worth. And I think we probably need to challenge each other a bit more in these conversations in our community, not in a divisive way, but being able to understand that how we are here is not the significant piece. However, if we can shift from triage to prevention as a whole community, we are making huge progress. And I would place bets, which I don't often, but I would place bets on a positive an outcome in terms of our statistics around humans impacted by substance use disorder. And so the wide lens is so much more. I mean, it's all of these efforts from ensuring that targeted case management isn't limited to human beings who experience some substance use disorder who are pregnant. The others we can't get to yet. But if you're pregnant, you can have a temporary case manager to navigate this. But as soon as you have that child, then you're on your own to navigate these systems. I mean, so there's pieces that we can tackle in terms of policy. But then I would like just really encourage us to get gutsy and go as far back as housing, as far back as basic needs. So these 5 young men are not sitting there questioning when I said, what do you think about the housing situation in our community? And their answer was, you're talking about like whether or not we can find housing or whether or not we're offered a home. It's like, yeah, that part. And so I think as I listened to Alicia, I couldn't agree more that you have to be healthy enough to show up in this, because this story does not carry unless this courage comes forth to be able to say what's going on with our human beings. But we also have to get a little bit more courageous in terms of doing things differently than the way that they've been done. This sounds a bit more of like a campaign that I had anticipated, but I feel so driven after hearing these stories around how to do this differently and how to build a community that takes into effect. We have a ton of information and resources at our disposal. We know how our families are impacted. We know how this impacts our youth and adolescents. We know that access is an issue. But we haven't really got bold enough to take a step back and care for everybody, regardless of their means and regardless of their resources. And I think if we could set the vetting aside of how we get there and just simply create, SUD can be very hidden. It can be in households with lots of resources. And it can also be very public. And I think this is the affiliation that our agency manages more specifically, because if you are in fact experiencing homelessness and you have a disease related to substance use disorder, it is incredibly visible. It is incredibly stigmatized. And yet I have met some of the hardest fighters that I have ever known in this process. And so the hope is even greater if there's a chance offered. I will reference a couple client stories, but I just for the sake of their privacy, I have changed the names. But Rachel is a client I met in the basement of the barn. I don't know how many people are familiar with our campus, but we're on Old County Road, where we have a family shelter and a barn that serves as our office space, storage space, supply space, lots of purposes. And I met Rachel in the basement one day, and she was clearly under the influence. And she had lost custody of both of her children at that point. Her partner was waiting in the car, and we had stored some Rubbermaid totes. They were living in their car for the most part. Sometimes they would scratch together enough money to be in a local hotel for a night or two. But she was looking for her car title because she needed to scrap the car and get rid of it. And so we were going through these totes, and it was, I mean, I was overwhelmed by she had a handful of pictures, mostly just old magazines and everything. I just thought, this is impossible. There's no way we are ever going to find this car title, and we didn't. And I knew the history here, and this isn't my proudest moment, but it's an honest room. But I thought, what else can we possibly do? We can't find housing right now. There's no way that there's a capacity to be able to pay rent, or to be able to interview with a landlord. And I just felt this gut of, so what's next? And it was her caseworker who said, then we take it one day at a time, Molly. We just keep showing up. We just keep showing up. And I'm gonna go through those boxes when she leaves, and I'm gonna find that car title, as she did. And she came back. She stayed engaged, and lo and behold, after some incredibly tumultuous days, we kept showing up, and there's not a lot of progress that's made in that time. But then Rachel got housed, and actually she does allow us to share her story. This is 3 years ago. She found an apartment. It was her first apartment of her own, and sleeping under a roof without her partner, who was incredibly abusive. She cut ties, and it was almost like a light switch had gone off, with a stable roof over her head. And she picked up a job at an incredibly reputable agency, and 2 years later, she is their shining star about every other month. And she is working on, she won't ever receive full custody back of her kids, but reconciliation and working with the adopted family. But it struck me because of my own feelings around this situation, which was also just a reminder that that's not mine to have, and you have to really remove yourself from these and just keep showing up in some way. But she said, as soon as I realized that I could have a place to stay on my own, and I felt safe. I felt safe enough to start doing this differently. And we see these stories, and I do think it takes a lot of time and a lot of patience and a lot of work on every level. But I also think we need to really widen our lens beyond treatment facilities and recovery and all of these other pieces, and really build a community that embraces people without the title of what you're coming in with. This is not a community of homeless individuals. This is a community that have people experiencing homelessness. This is a community that have people experiencing substance use disorder and disease. And I think that as we leave and discuss more today, I think that's the focus of what we do as we survive as family members and individuals. So I'm more than happy to talk also about just the approach to care, but I just feel like hearing these stories, there's an opportunity here to just suggest this charge and dare us to do things that are different. If any community is poised to do this, I would be inclined to say the Midcoast would take that challenge. but we also have to make that manageable. And as an agency that's getting into housing, we need all the support we can get to build those houses with dignified opportunities and to be those neighbors regardless of what you're bringing into your home. So.
Thank you, Molly. And can you bring our Zoom community spaces up? Okay. So I'm going to pitch out a couple of questions, and then we'll throw it out to you to ask your questions of these. One of the things, I kept writing notes about things I wanted to ask you. One of the things that came up for me when you were talking about Rachel's situation, that also related to Jean and Alicia's, where do they get their money? How do these people who are in these situations, how do they eat? How do they, tell me.
Are you asking me?
I'm asking all of you, yeah.
I think we probably all have answers to that. Something that I remind our team of every single day and in so many different contexts is that we work with survivors, and which is also an opportunity, because should those survival skills be channeled, there again lies the hope. And so I mean, I can get as specific as saying there are some of the individuals we work with have diagnosed disabilities and receive some level of Social Security. And then we also have family members and individuals who will make incredibly challenging decisions on the street to be able to barter and beg and be able to still access. There's a very tight social network too between folks, and so particularly if you're in a shared household, people take care of one another too, and so there's a lot of that. But I think, and then I would also say that there are a lot of people that are gainfully employed and living with this disease too, so it can look very different for a lot of different people.
Looks like you're poised with an answer, Alicia.
My daughter, most of the time she doesn't do it legally, unfortunately. And she's in Portland, so they also thankfully have a really great, in downtown Portland, she can eat there. She visits a day shelter where she can take a shower, and they have services there, and so it's a wide variety of things. She's thinking about trying to figure out how to navigate her way back to getting a job. That was a conversation we had. But I think a lot of them are really survivors, and they're going to do what they need to do to survive.
Jean?
Well, addiction is so strong that people will do things that they wouldn't normally do. One of my biggest clues that my son was using was I caught him in lies, and he was a very trusting kid, honest kid, and he got quite good at it. So he also would sell things that maybe weren't his, use money for something else, for the drugs that was intended. He would go to thrift, we have a share shed in our transfer station, and get used items and sell them on eBay. They get very creative, because drug is highly motivating, because the addiction is strong.
I'm just going to add something real quick. So my daughter would, like, when she's clear and when she's not using, she knows that she should not be doing some of the things that she has done, but this drug, it drives you to do things. She doesn't even enjoy doing these drugs, she doesn't enjoy any of it. And she gets sick when she stops. And so it's such a vicious cycle. And I think that's part of the reason why we need more resources, because it's not just homelessness. It's how are they going to get a job? Who's going to hire them right now? You know, she doesn't have any prospects to get a job. So there's so many pieces to this. But I think the community part, like focusing on a bigger community, that's the way to go. That's the way to help these kids.
It's also the barriers. You know, once you get a criminal record, it goes on your job application. It goes on your application for an apartment. We need to remove these barriers because once a person has if they were arrested, done their time, recover from drugs, why should they still be stigmatized their whole life? And we've become a society of no second chances. And why is that? Yeah.
I can see Sarah back there. I think she's got a very relevant question she wants to throw out
Well, I
here.
have two things. Can you hear me on this microphone? Am I volumized? Okay. The first one is actually for the room. If you, in your life, have been interacting with ever someone in your life who had substance use disorder, whether opioids, something else, alcoholism, raise your hand. Is there anyone in this room who has never known someone, a coworker, a client, an educator, a friend? We've all been impacted by this. It's just how far it is from your circle at that moment. And you might not even know. There are those people who manage it for a time or for a very long time that hide it, or their families help to hide it. And I think that speaks really importantly to the destigmatization and how important that is.
Yeah.
About 15 or 16 years ago, I learned that one of my aunts was a heroin addict and had been lying and borrowing money from the family under different premises to support that habit. And eventually the truth came out, and fortunately she was able to find the support that she needed and motivation, and she is still with us and sober and doing well and enjoying her grandchildren. And we weren't sure that was going to be a possibility. And she was not the person I ever would have expected to see in that situation. So I think understanding and extending that grace, because we don't know how people come to that path sometimes. And then also, how do we support the work by the destigmatization? And I think this program is one step. Being willing to share those stories when you have them is a step. I loved I was going to ask you about this, but I love that it came up about supporting your local businesses who do work to hire people who have either, you know, a criminal history or maybe not even, but have had substance use disorder issues in their past. People who have been unhoused or who are presently challenged with where they live can be really tough to find stable employment because of all the factors that come with that. So if you know a local business supports people in those ways, thank them. Tell them so. And I was curious for the panelists if there are other ways we as a community can make sure that we keep this at the forefront, we help to destigmatize, or we encourage specific actions and efforts that might help people as they are finding their way.
Sarah, if I could just reframe are you actually asking us what can not only we do if we're part of an organization, but what can we as individuals do?
Well, we all know we can donate money. We all know we can support legislative efforts and write to your representatives. But what else have you seen, or what has impacted you, or what would you like to encourage folks to do that help to bring the community together around this, to do that work and to help it not be something to be ashamed of, and to encourage the employers or the neighbors or the educators who are helping do that work?
Okay, so I have something that I think will answer your question. So it is exhausting to try to pretend that you're normal. Like, it's exhausting for me to pretend that my life is normal. It's exhausting. So when I go to the grocery store, like over Christmas, when this whole crisis started happening, you go to the store and you just see people and they're like, oh, hey, how you doing? And, how's your kids doing? And to sit there and go like, they're great, you know, like, and at the time, really, our life's falling apart. And so that part's exhausting. So I would say one thing that you can do to help end the stigma is make it safe for me to actually tell you, like, make it safe for me to say that. And don't make me pretend like I have friends here tonight, I can tell you that things are really bad, like, you know, and you don't, that's, I think, such a huge thing, is like, just let me tell you the truth and not have to lie about it. And also, sometimes all you can do is, for moms like me, or, you know, any family members like me, just give us a hug, just bring me over some tea, you know, maybe a cookie, something, you know, like, just show me you care. Just sit with me, show me that you care. I think if more of us were honest, or more people allowed me to be honest and not feel ashamed about, like, my family, I think that would be a big step forward.
A follow-up question to that, Leisha, how is it that you know when someone's not open to letting you be honest? What does that look like?
Gosh, I mean, sometimes, have you ever been like, somebody asks you how you are, and they really don't want the answer, but you just like tell them, oh my God, my daughter's in the hospital, she's on drug addict, and you just like start going like that, and they just get a look on their face. I've done that a couple times. But sometimes people will just like sit and nod, they're just, mm-hmm. And then sometimes they'll be like, you know, that's all I want, is just a little human connection. And you can tell when you can't fake that, like, you can't fake that human connection. So just real human connection and kindness goes a long way.
I don't know if I'm supposed to say things like this, but like when editorials in the paper say that this is where the schizophrenics and drug addicts gather, let's challenge that. And let's have more dialogue about what this means as a community, and also represent the fact that there is a wide scope of community that's both impacted and cares. And I mean, I think what I just picked up there on there, Leisha, at the end, is connection. And so much of what our care model is that we bring to clients is building healthy relationships. So our clients will show up and they will do the work if they experience a healthy relationship in that process, if they are seen. And that process can take a long time. So I think as individuals, we can charge ourselves with being really patient, with showing up in a very consistent way, in a way that we don't have to know the trauma, we don't even have to have seen the trauma, but we could just respect that it's there, and that has an impact on what people are able to give in that moment. And so be patient with change, but then be patient with one another, and recognize that that trauma and this disease changes your brain chemistry, and sometimes it makes people say things that are not very likable, particularly if they're under the influence. But to be able to show up again the next day, maybe when there is more clarity, that sentiment of coming back again is something that many of our families have never had before. Some of them just say, like, you're not going to kick me out now? No, but we're going to try again tomorrow. And so I think if we can really push ourselves to be able to do that in an incredibly genuine way and practice healthy relationships and modeling, I don't know that there's any kind of best practice care model that is more effective than simply showing up with a genuine, healthy, consistent self for others, because it's not something that we should just assume everybody has had that experience. And if anything, particularly if somebody has been struggling for a really long time, chances are the relationships in their lives are probably both dangerous and unhealthy. And so to be that, to be the rare, continuous person that just allows, and that doesn't mean letting guards down and getting hurt, but you can still show up steadily with a level of understanding. I mean, I think some of it is simple too. Just be a good neighbor, and I think, practice that in our daily lives, resist the divisiveness, and you never really know who you're going to impact in that moment if you make that space without asking somebody to work for it.
Yeah, I've got a couple points. What we were talking about being a good neighbor. One thing I've noticed is people, when they're cycling back into trouble, they'll isolate themselves. My son does that. So check on people. If you don't see them for a while, ask them to coffee. And another point, there's stigma in healthcare. I would love to see more education for doctors about substance use. I hear over and over how people, once they see substance use on their medical record, they're not given certain medications. They're not treated, they're not taken seriously. They figure, oh, it's just the drugs they're taking. But doctors need to also be educated, and nurses need to be educated in substance use. And because of that stigma, I've also heard that people are reluctant to go to doctors unless they're in dire need. And that's not good either. But thank you.
I've got the handheld microphone, so if anybody in the room wants to ask a question, I'll bring it to you. And again, anyone on Zoom, if you want to type your question into the chat, we will share it with the panel.
Hi, I've been sitting here listening to everybody, and I'm bursting at the seams trying to say things. I'm not a chatterbox, but I have some ideas that I think are important. And in Rockland,
Just a little bit.
I'm sorry, in Rockland, we have a Naranon meeting, and it's just exactly what the two mothers here spoke of. We really stress taking care of ourselves and not getting hung up in the roller coaster ride that our children take us on, or our husbands, or our siblings. And it's a chance to sit together with other women, and it's mostly women in our group. Mothers really are out there for their kids, not that men aren't, but it's a wonderful program, and it's a 12-step program, but it's a chance for people to sit down and talk about their loved ones and not be judged like some of our family members might judge them. We meet on Tuesday nights at 5 o'clock at the Episcopal Church right across the lawn, and it's a wonderful thing if you can go. Tuesday nights, it's there for mothers and fathers, and you get a lot of support and ideas and what not to say to your loved ones, what not to do to your loved ones, and get your lives back on track as much as you can. And the other thing I wanted to say, I've run Naranon groups for about 30 years now all over the state, and Bangor had this really cool creative program for drug addicts work. A man who had a heart for drug addicts would show up at a certain spot in Bangor early in the morning at 6 or 6:30, and people could line up and jump on the back of that truck and work all day, and he guaranteed them $100. And this was like 20 years ago that I was doing this, but we need to be creative like that. We need to be able to say, my garden needs to be weeded, and I hate doing it. I'm gonna go over to the hospitality house and see if any people want to help me with that today, and not be afraid. They're not going to send you somebody that's high, and that would give them nothing is better for your psyche is working and feeling good about a hard day's work, and I think that's really important. Another way is I'm a Rotarian, and we are heavily involved with your program, and join a club, join your church, get your church to do some things. There are so many ways to help people, and there is a little bit of fear involved, but most people who work with addicts know them and know what they can do without doing any trouble in the community. And I think that was it. I'm sorry I went on so fast and loud, but please come to a Naranon meeting on Tuesday nights if it's in your schedule.
I think you just reflected our mission, strengthen and amplify our voices, so no apology needed.
To
reminder about the Narranon meetings.
And if you aren't in Rockland, I'm sure you can look up where your local one would be.
There's only one other in the state, but this is a.
Or get some folks together and
we
start
have
one.
People from all over who come.
Any other questions here in the room or comments you'd like to make?
So my daughter's husband's brother succumbed to this 20 years ago. Okay, my daughter's husband's brother succumbed to, I think it was fentanyl or one of the drugs 20 years ago. He was a fisherman, young fellow, and his brother who lives now, Michael Gorman, is a playwright and has written a series of plays over the past 10 years about the addiction in the fishing community. And their model is, the door they come in is arts and advocacy in stripping the stigma, which there's a huge one of course. Even to mount the art is stigmatized. To put the play on has to go through some hurdles. Anyway, they're having their production this year at the Colonial Theater in Augusta. They call it a blues opera because they incorporate the passion of the suffering and perhaps the redemption and recovery in it. And so I have some postcards here, if I may leave a few on the back table, and everybody's welcome. It isn't about cost. If that's an obstacle, they have you can attend. So, and it's modeled on Moby Dick, who of course had this great battle with the whale. And
Would you like to see the name of the play for the folks on Zoom? Can you read the name so the people on Zoom can know it?
okay, it's, excuse me. The name of the play is The Ahab Inside Me, which is from Moby Dick. The playwright is Michael Gorman. It's at the Colonial Theater in Augusta, July 20th through July 23rd. Tickets are online at the 40 Hour Club, FORTY hour, HOUR club.com.
Can I put those on the table for you? Anyone else in the room have a comment or a question for the panel? I'm sure you've got thoughts. I know you're thoughtful ladies. I've seen you. I have a quick question for Molly then. You mentioned your client who having the stability of housing made a big difference for, and this is a stat that I happen to know, but I'd love to hear it from you. What's your waiting list look like for housing right now?
So KCHC, we actually currently just have, it's 6 units in total for actual housing. So the majority of what we provide for services is the service itself for case management. So it becomes a navigation and finding housing. I will say, and I know that I am biased, but this is a team of relentless home hunters. And so to get into services right now, it's several weeks, if not months, for case management. However, we do have urgent needs, and so we never pick up the phone and say, we'll call you in 2 months. We do have like interim support that we try to help navigate whatever other resources are in the community, and we'll do, if we have a apartment or something that comes open, we'll get there. So always worth a call. But it's months right now for case management, and I think this is a reflection that is really important, because the harder it is to find housing for our families, the harder it is to sort of move people through their goals and being able to engage. And so we actually just, I don't know that I don't know if it's really considered winning, but we worked with the Department of Health and Human Services to clarify. At one point there was a question of whether or not, as soon as somebody became housed, then they're no longer eligible for this support, which very quickly we challenged. And to truly say that if, the work oftentimes begins there. However, we can take on a certain amount of capacity for folks that are currently looking for housing and those services, but it's lengthy. And I also don't want that to deter anybody from calling, because we have a group of incredible people and other providers in the community that, depending on the information that we gather and what's going on with an individual, we may be able to place in some support services that can help. I'm always really struck by the expectations on human beings, and it is incredibly challenging to navigate regardless of what your circumstances are. But being somebody in the provider sector, I cannot emphasize enough just how challenging it is to connect dots in systems, from staying eligible for food stamps to understanding that actually taking that part-time job undercut what you can put on the table for food, and I actually can't afford to have a job and housing at the same time. And so, this is the work that needs to happen at the state level, but it needs to happen with our families so they can thoughtfully make decisions towards stability in the circumstances that we're in right now. There's not a day that goes by that we celebrate and then we go, oh, so how are we gonna navigate that? And I think particularly when we're talking about co-occurring needs with substance use disorders, the expectations are unreasonable on our community members to be able to try to understand what's their next move.
Actually, if I can pick up on that, when you were delivering your comments initially, you talked about the systemic shifts that need to be happening. And as I was talking and chatting with a few of you before this, I realized you are also from agencies or other organizations. And I was wondering if you might be able to comment on what obstacles or what avenues you see for that systemic shifting that's going on. I assume you think it needs to happen as well, so.
While we wait for a hand to rise from the crowd, we did have a comment that I think is a wonderful point, and it's another aspect of this. Callie said that if you are able to get a training and carry Narcan or naloxone, you have to be alive to be able to survive and thrive and change, and it is a very easy thing, and there are a number of agencies in the area that offer trainings that can get you free Narcan to have, so that in the instance you might encounter someone who is experiencing an overdose from opioids, it is one of the best survival tools we have in that moment. And it is wonderful that the community has access to that now. It isn't limited to EMTs or those kinds of emergency responders.
If I could jump in, we can, if you can reach me after this, I can hook you up with Narcan. I can train you in 30 seconds. It's very, very simple to learn. And we're trying to also get it's also called naloxone. That's the generic name. Narcan is the company name. We'd like to have it normalized, just like an EpiPen, where it's in every household. In fact, we have a grant right now, a branch of MRAP called Mobilized Recovery. We're going door to door canvassing throughout Kennebec County and training people right there at the front door. It takes 30 seconds or less to do it. And we're dropping off 2 boxes with 2 doses each. And we're recommending they keep 1 in their car and 1 in their home, just in case. Because you never know. You might have somebody over the house, you might be in Walmart's parking lot and find somebody slumped over. My son was saved a couple times by strangers. So even if you don't have somebody in your family, I think it should be just normal to have it handy. I keep it in my purse.
Not in your car though, is it?
Oh, well,
But you keep it in your purse is better. That's what
well,
I always told people.
yeah, but we kind of disagree. Yes, it slightly affects the Narcan, but it's better to have it and not have it. It'll still work.
The question was if keeping it in your car, if the heat would affect it negatively. And fortunately, most of the year Maine's not that hot, but good to
Yeah.
be aware that it could slightly affect it.
Slightly affected, but our feeling is it's better to have it than not. And also, I would love to pass these out. Everybody needs to know about the Good Sam Law. It was passed this last year, and Maine has the strongest Good Sam Law in the nation. Yes, which is amazing.
What is it?
A Good Sam means that if you call 911 at the scene of an overdose, that you will be immune from most of the crimes. It doesn't protect you from violence towards children or sex crimes. Those are the two exceptions.
And this was intended so that if
Yeah.
there are people gathered together who are using substances and there's an overdose happening, they aren't afraid to call the police because they are afraid they would be charged with a substance abuse crime, drug possession, something like that. So that's really powerful.
Sarah, I just wanted to, I feel like I went down the rabbit hole of our wait list for services, and I failed to say that we have 10 units coming on board at Talbot Avenue in Rockland. So I feel like you gave me a softball there, and I forgot to say that. So, so we do have a project that is coming around the corner, and that the intention behind this and all of the housing projects that we've engaged in and sort of been planful around is to build mixed and balanced communities. So this is not necessarily a project that is maybe more familiar around project base, which is 30% of area median income and below. The intention is to build all the way up to 80% of eligibility, and then there will be 3 habitat homes in phase 2 for home ownership. So it's a really unique design, and it's a collaboration with Habitat for Humanity and Maine State Housing. So I would say towards the end of this year, we will initiate the wait list for those units and their mixed family and individual cottages too. And a shout out to Callie too, because she's one of our team members, and I would have let her field the wait list question, because that's her territory.
And I'd like to thank, while we have a moment, 2 of our panelists who couldn't be here tonight. They are doing the good work at the State House and Senate, trying to make sure that important legislative initiatives can get passed, because their session is dragging onwards. So they were really apologetic that they couldn't be here. But Betsy Sweet was on our panel tonight, and Courtney Gallery Allen from MIRAP, and they absolutely are open to discussions about this and the importance of it, and I hope we can see them on a different panel in the future when maybe they're not in the screeching last minute, 11th hour.
Thank you for throwing that in, because I do want to they were both so committed, and I really, you can tell when someone's not just, oh, I've got something better to do tonight. But Courtney went so far as to get a replacement, and so we have Jean here at the last minute, pinch hitting, and did a pretty good job, I'd say.
Oh,
Thank you. And I'm acting like Betsy, not, so.
I have a question about giving someone this.
Narcan?
Yes.
Yes.
Are there instances where if you don't know whether they've overdosed on an opiate, you're going to injure them, or like there are no adverse reactions
Yeah.
if it's not that?
It will
type
do
of-
no harm.
Okay.
Because a person going through overdose will not tell you what they're on. They're incapable of doing that. But if you suspect it is opiate, give it anyway. And having it in your home, if one of your kids get hold of it, it will do no harm. If a pet gets hold of it, it will do no harm. But it saves lives. Yeah.
I remember having a conversation with some legislators on my deck about 6, 7, 8 years ago. 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat, and this subject came up about the Narcan.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the Republicans was going to vote to relax the restrictions on it. The other one was about, no, I don't want to do that because it will make people think that they can overdose and then there's an easy way out. And the third legislator happened to be from Oklahoma, and so they're like clueless down there. Cindy, I didn't really say that. But anyway, I was just wondering if anyone in the room even knows, has there been a political shift around that?
I'm sensing it. I really am, because we're going door to door, and people are really appreciated that we are training them in Narcan. I don't think we would have had that 2 years ago. However, we also get some people thinking that we are enabling people, we're prolonging their drug use.
That was my question.
Yeah.
Is that starting to subside a bit?
Yeah, it is, but it's still out there.
Yeah.
And yeah. But no, we're keeping people alive so they can choose recovery.
Oh, I don't know if everyone, that was so that they can choose recovery. I think
Yes.
those are very powerful words.
Yeah. That is a point. You cannot force a person into treatment, as you've
Yeah.
seen. Wouldn't it be neat if you could, but it's not going to do them any good. They have to be in the right frame of mind and be willing to go through it.
Jane, you,
I've talked to more than one policeman who has shown up time after time with the same kids overdosing and being very frustrated, saying similar things like, I think we might be enabling them. I don't want to quote them to say that exactly, but what's really important is we're saving a life, and we might save it more than once, but there needs to be some follow-up, some aftercare to the situation, and people need to, if you take them into a hospital or wherever after they've been saved by Narcan, to encourage them to go get some counseling or do something in that matter that way. It rather than just get them every other night, have some help.
and as a matter of fact, you can, because I was going to say we're getting close to our time here, so I would like to give the panelists each an opportunity to make a closing remark and incorporate that into it.
So this tattoo that I have, that's a representation of the chemical symbol for Narcan. So my kid has been Narcaned 100 times. I mean, I've cleaned up her needles and used Narcan things, hundreds of needles, and I don't know how many containers of Narcan. And people have said, not to my face, but they've said to me online, this is not worth it. She's not worth saving. Like, and I don't know how you can look somebody in the face and tell them, your kid is not worth saving. That's my whole life. And so I think part of this has to be just, if you are a diabetic and you needed insulin, and then, I'm gonna use you as an example, okay? You're the diabetic, hopefully you don't have diabetes. So she's the diabetic, she needs insulin, and she just goes to Dunkin' and gets a 6-pack of donuts and a large coffee with 10 sugars. And then the state or whoever, main care, pays for her insulin. Nobody's questioning them for that. Nobody's questioning anything else except addiction. We shouldn't, my kids shouldn't be, we shouldn't be questioning whether or not we're gonna save my kid when we're saving everybody else's kids. Why is it my kid? It's just gonna be saved. When are we start judging who we're gonna save and who we're not gonna save? Let's just save all of them. I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Leisha.
You get to follow that, not me, right?
Oh, I so agree with you.
Pull the microphone a little closer, please.
Dead people do not recover, just pure and simple. So we got to do what we can do to keep them alive until they choose recovery. And this is a different model than what we were taught old, AA and alcoholics, that they have to reach rock bottom. Now we need to keep them alive until they choose recovery. Love them. As I said before, if you don't remember anything, just love them unconditionally. Because you know what? You might be their one lifeline that keeps them going, keeps them wanting to stay alive. So be that lifeline. Thank you.
I think that there's a really important difference, as I shared the story of the case manager who looked at me and said, you know, we just keep showing up. And there's an important difference between providers being able to show up for our community members and moms and brothers and dads. And I think we have to honor what are these relationships and stop putting such an onus on these family relationships to carry this weight. And I think we need to lean into the medical field and the medical professionals and really allow people to carry this lift, and not just allow it, but demand it. Make it okay that somebody who's struggling with alcoholism returned to the hospital for the 7th time for detox, because maybe it's that time. And so I think it's complicated, it's layered, and but also that the pathways to recovery from medical intervention need to not be quite so complicated. There needs to be an accessible option for each person, and that's doable. So I think really building an understanding of what robust service provisions that we have that can create an extra safety net with families, but for families to take care of themselves and model healthy relationships and behaviors, and encourage their young people to, and any people in their lives, to lean into our healthcare system and make this more of a priority within our healthcare system as a whole, but also as our community, and create a space. You know, the last few years, it's no surprise that humans are struggling on a lot of different levels, and humans who have been in recovery for years, yet were displaced from their apartment because it was bought up and is now sitting vacant for an unbeknownst amount of time. Many of them have slipped back into use, and I think let's take responsibility for the environment and the ecosystem that we live in, and the pressures that puts on people who are living with disease.
When we do these programs, we never know who's going to show up or how many people are going to show up. But I do accept that those who do show up are the people who can help take these messages further and something from it. So showing up, the three of you mentioned showing up several times. I noted that. So I want to say I'm glad that you showed up as well, because you're part of the solution.
And our friends on Zoom.
And our friends on Zoom. Hello, Zoomers. Yeah, exactly. It's so nice to be able to extend it to our Zoom community as well. But showing up is one of the things that I really heard that's important to whether you're a caseworker or you have a child that you're a caseworker for. And then the other thing I wanted to say in terms of closing the program is that my yoga teacher, the very first class I ever had with her, she starts out every class with something ethereal and philosophical and whatever, and then we wind up back at the end. The first thing she ever said is to practice being kinder than necessary. And that has been, it's such an easy thing to do. And yet it's a big part of the message that I've heard here tonight, is that we need to put away our stigmas, our thoughts, our whatevers, and be kinder than necessary. Show up and be kinder than necessary. In fact, speaking of showing up, a woman who could not be here tonight, and I'll put these on the back table as well, because she's running a program. What was that, Smart something? But anyway,
Smart recovery.
but she's with the Coastal Recovery Community Center, another resource for us. And I know that there's many of you who are out there who are resources as well. So I just want to make sure I get that out, but I just was so touched that she came over here. She's just doing what she's doing next door, but she couldn't be two places at once. But she made sure that we had materials for her. So the thing I would encourage us all, especially since I know that so many of you are from provider organizations, I hope that you'll keep that thing about the need to be more systemic. How can we, even if our own organizations aren't there yet, how do we as individuals reach out and make that happen? Sarah?
I want to also give a special thank you to our co-hosts here at the Rockland Public Library. And as you may or may not have heard, libraries are very much on the front lines of the opioid crisis because they are a safe and open public place. And they themselves have had to deal with how do we make sure that we are prepared if someone in our community is experiencing an overdose on our premises, or how can we help to educate and share? And I really appreciate them hosting this program as another way that we can help get the community to rally around the people who need this help. And so they're always great hosts. They have amazing technology. It's very wonderful to be in this room, but I think on this topic, it's extra important. So thank you to them.
When I was, my first job I ever had was a page in the library. So what we would do, I learned the Dewey Decimal System really well that way, put the books back on the shelves. So as I watch M. Lewis, who's behind over there, she prefers to be behind, there's her hand, do such a skillful job of managing the Zoom portion of this. But it would be interesting for us to have a program on the evolution of libraries, because it's just like I say, when I think about back when I was in high school, which was a while ago at the public library, how far libraries have come in all that time. So thank you for co-hosting with us, as you always do. And you have something else to say, Sarah?
Just wanted to encourage, since you mentioned different ideas for programs, that we do programs throughout the year, but we tend to avoid the very busy summer season because scheduling is really tricky for everyone. But if you're interested in attending other programs or helping us do organizing and supporting these kinds of presentations in the area, please find our website or find us on Facebook so you can keep track of our schedule, and we hope to see you at some of those also. But if you want to get more involved, we are here with open arms for that too.
Well, she's absolutely right. This is our last program of the season, although we'll be busy working throughout the summer to get our programs up for the fall and into the winter. So anyway, thank you all for being here. So nice to meet you. Thank the panel. The person who does the marketing. I have to present your mugs. One of our thank yous for taking the time to be with us are these Midcoast Women mugs with our mission on the back. So
Thank you. Thanks.
thank you.